Nelson Mandela was a living legend. You don't get to live with a lot of legends while you've got your short time on earth here. I wasn't around when Martin Luther King was alive. I wasn't around when FDR was alive. Nelson Mandela was our legend. And he passed today. He was 95 years old. He's got a Nobel Peace Prize from 1993, obviously brought South Africa out of apartheid and into a democracy. Enough good things cannot be said of him, but what I wanted to do was give you a little bit of background and so that you begin to understand why the man was such a legend. First of all, back in 1952, and I did not know this until today, he had set up the first black law firm in South Africa. So little details that give you insight into his character. It was Mandela and Tambo. In 1956, he was accused of treason. He stood trial, was acquitted in 1961. Later, he led this, what they called the Spear of the Nation, which was the militant faction of the African National Congress, which he had led and started up. So now the South African government went after him for that, and they wound up giving him a life sentence. Now, a lot of people judge him for that. I remember Rush Limbaugh once did a segment saying Nelson Mandela was a terrorist. No, he didn't say that back in the 1960s, of course. He said it after Nelson Mandela had liberated South Africa and had done it entirely peacefully and had made sure to protect the minority in South Africa, which of course were whites. But nonetheless, of course, some in the right wing have never forgiven him for that. And the reality is the entirety of his career showed just about as well as anyone has ever shown in human history that you can accomplish amazing things through peace, not through violence. Now, what happened after he went to prison? Well, he went to prison for 27 years. 18 of those he served on Robben Island, where he worked at a quarry doing hard labor, so literally breaking rocks, for 18 years. And they would keep a timer on him as well as all of the other prisoners. And if they went to the bathroom for too long or they dared to rest too long, they would get in trouble. And anytime a prisoner got in trouble, where did they go? They went to Nelson Mandela, who would always represent them. So no matter what kind of a tough spot he himself was in, he never bent on his principles and was there for everyone else. And everyone clamored to sit with him at lunch to get his guidance and his counsel. Do you know that in his prison cell, there was no bread whatsoever? He had to sleep for 18 years on a cold, hard floor. There was no bathroom. He had to go into a bucket. Picture him on that cold floor with a bucket in the corner. Well, he did get visitors once a year for 30 minutes. Every 6 months, he'd get to send a letter. Now, every once in a while, you'll hear a current day leader, whether it's in this country or another, say, things are too hard. We can't get that done. It's not possible. You can't do that. Then think of Nelson Mandela in that prison cell, bearing that for 18 years, bearing the imprisonment for 27 years. And I'm positive that in that 27 years, many, many people told him, hey, you're crazy. This can't get done. You want to talk about an iron will? And when he came out, he was elected the first democratically elected president of South Africa. And what did he do? He went on to not only do the Truth and Reconciliation Task Force, where they did not punish the former apartheid regime. They just got to the truth so that the country could heal. They did not act out of vengeance. All the great leaders, Abraham Lincoln said we should not punish the South after the Civil War. FDR said we should not punish the Germans and the Japanese after World War II. Forgiving, healing. Martin Luther King talked about how you can't lead out of the darkness with more darkness. You could only lead out of it with more light. And that's exactly what Nelson Mandela did in his lifetime. Of course, Gandhi, another great example of that. One other thing about when he was in prison, do you know that in 1985, President P.W. Botha said to Nelson Mandela, I will let you out of prison. You just have to agree to conduct yourself as we tell you, through nonviolence, etc. Now, Nelson Mandela was already on the path of nonviolence at that point, but they wanted him to sign a bunch of things. Could have been let out of that terrible, terrible imprisonment that he had been serving for decades. Here's what his response was. What freedom am I being offered while the organization of the people remains banned? Only free men can negotiate. A prisoner cannot enter into contracts. And he stayed. Who among today's leaders would have that kind of courage? To stay in that awful, awful prison. So anytime somebody tells you something can't be done, think about Nelson Mandela on that cold, hard floor and how they told him it couldn't be done. Does anybody else have that kind of willpower to stay in prison for 27 years to get it done? And then to be so grand that when you come out, you're not bitter about it. And you say the first thing you do is say, hey, we're going to protect everyone's here, everyone's rights. Because I didn't fight for a black South Africa. I fought for all of South Africa. In fact, one of the reasons he became famous is because during his trial, he said this. During my lifetime, I have dedicated myself to the struggle of the African people. I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve. But if needs be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. Now, luckily for all of us, he did not die at that point. He lived a long life to the age of 95. And even after he got out of office, what did he do? He worked towards children's causes, fought AIDS in South Africa, which claimed his son, and fought so many different fights to make sure justice was served, not just in South Africa, but throughout the world. Truly a leader for the ages. And I was honored to be on the same planet as him for however long we were together. And now he's left us, and it is a great void, a void that probably cannot be filled. A living legend has passed.